Before we start today's episode, I'm going to ask you a quick favor. Please sign up for our brand new email newsletter. If you were on our old newsletter, sign up again. Long story short, we're hitting the reset button. You can sign up for this at dataskeptic.com. Head on over there. You'll likely need to scroll down just a little bit, and there will be a place sign up for our email newsletter. If you don't like it, unsubscribe. Your unsubscribe event is actually useful feedback to us. It will not be taken personally. I'm going to evolve this and take your feedback, but here's how it's going to start. It's coming out Wednesday this week, the very first edition, Wednesday the 24th. If you missed that sign up, you'll get on the next one. Our newsletter is going to have original extra content. First and foremost, we will have the extended guest bio in the newsletter. Wouldn't that be a nice compliment as you listen to the show, or maybe before you listen, pull it up, you have that day's guest bio. We're also going to throw in some extra content we're writing on a new blog we're launching, and the newsletter will be one of the main places I'll give you behind-the-scenes content and announcements. For example, our ad tech season's probably going to go through the end of the year. I have already decided what comes next, and the newsletter subscribers are going to hear about it before the listeners. So head over to dataskeptic.com, scroll down a little bit depending on your window size, and please sign up for our new email newsletter. How many of you own a smart speaker? Do you ever worry about it listening when you don't expect? Do you worry about what happens when your voice query is transmitted to the cloud? For me, I'm not worried about surveillance. Some hacker would have already identified a backdoor by now if there was one there. But surveillance isn't the only thing worth being concerned about. When you interact with the actions of your smart speaker, a lot of information and metadata flows from your machine to a server somewhere. Today's episode explores one way in which that data can be used for targeting.
My name is Umar, and I am a postdoctoral scholar at the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington.
And can you tell me a little bit about your focus there?
My research is broadly in privacy, and I mostly emphasize on bringing transparency and control on the internet. And by transparency, I essentially mean to uncover data collection, usage, and sharing practices of different online services. And with control, I mean to improve the existing and also build new tools that can mitigate some of the data collection and usage.
So I think an extreme point of view on this in terms of transparency might be that we're already there. We have these, 300-page user agreements. You have to click a checkbox to say that you read, and everything is fully spelled out there. That's a sort of cynical point of view, but quite seriously, what do we do? What's missing? How do we fix it?
I think, of course, everything is mentioned in the privacy policies, but for most people, they don't read privacy policies. Even as a researcher, before actually getting into this research, I never read a privacy policy. And then there's another case where the data collection, usage, and sharing practices might not actually align with what is stated in the privacy policy.
Could you summarize a little bit about what general transparency tools exist today? This is a growing field. Obviously, I think we both agree we want to see progress made, but we're not starting from square one. I know, like on Facebook, I can do some sort of download all of my data. What's the current state of transparency tooling and availability?
Right. So recently, some of the data protection regulations like GDPR and CCPA has enforced these online services to at least provide some transparency into how they are using that information. But it is just like scratching a surface. So for Facebook, Google, and Amazon, you can look what things they have collected. But we still lack transparency into how that is used and whether that is shared with other entities on the internet, for example.
Well, these topics apply in lots of different areas in digital communications, but of course we're going to focus today on Alexa and the smart speaker space. How did you first get interested in this area?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. So I think the idea behind our research was that the smart speakers are now being used by millions of people, and we do not understand how they work, like what data do they collect, how that is used, and whether that is shared with anyone else. And these questions become even more important because voice is an information-rich modality, and it can be used to infer several physical and psychological characteristics of people. For example, what's their age, what's their gender, or how confident they are, or what was their mood when they were interacting with these smart speakers. And there is no systematic measurement study, at least in the privacy and security research, that analyzes how these smart speakers actually operate. So we wanted to bring transparency into how they collect, use, and share user data.
Well, one of the tests I use when I think about what could be detected by machine learning is to just say, could I do this, or could a trained expert? And
Right.
certainly, not even an expert, anybody can tell or have a pretty good guess about age and gender, even mood to a certain degree on the phone. So yes, I absolutely believe those examples can be going on.
Right.
But you can also get into like conspiracy tinfoil hat territory. How much do you worry? How really information rich are our voices?
Right. So I think, of course, like some of these things can be inferred with basic machine learning models. But the danger here is that a voice is a biometric data. You cannot change it. So once it is leaked or shared, you cannot do anything about it. Unlike other traditional tracking techniques that we have on mobile or desktop devices. So I think that makes it a unique vector.
So Google search is ubiquitous. We type in a query, we get some search results. I think most people have an understanding that those are personalized. I don't know if people expect Alexa to be personalized or not, and I don't know if they even would be comfortable with that. What is to start with, what does Amazon say is going on? What should people be expecting?
I think that's an interesting question because these smart speakers are somewhat a special devices because people put them in their homes at like intimate places like their bedrooms, and they talk to them as they're talking to a family member. And if those smart speakers are essentially recording what you're saying to them and using it to influence you, for example through online ads, it's like having a family member selling your data to whoever bids the highest. To answer your question directly about Amazon, so Amazon currently states in their privacy policy that they collect personal information. And in that personal information section, they list several things, including your interaction with the smart speakers and your voice. But some of their public policies, like an interview by an Amazon executive to the New York Times, Amazon claimed that they do not use voice recordings to serve targeted ads. So I think that kind of like contradicts with what is stated in the privacy policies, and it at best creates confusion in consumers' mind.
Well, I mean, if the privacy policy says it might be allowed and the executive said, no, we're not doing it, isn't that just a stronger statement than the policy?
Yeah, so I think as a user, I would look for the most straightforward statement, and I might believe that Amazon is not using that. But the privacy policy still like has this confusing statement that people might interpret differently.
Makes sense. Well, Amazon's not the only company at the table here. What's the role of third-party players? Who's also got their, not thumb in the pie, but ear on the vine, perhaps?
Yeah. I think that's an interesting question. So one of the premise that we set while doing this research was to actually explore what these skills are doing. Because in other platforms, mostly the third-party skills are responsible for excessively collecting data or sharing it with other entities. And we were actually surprised that Amazon was directly profiling users and using it to serve them targeted ads.
And where do they experience those targeted ads?
Well, they appear on the web. So we linked our Amazon account with a browser profile, and we browsed the web, and we saw that the ads were what data we leaked for that particular Amazon profile. Ads also appeared on the smart speakers themselves. So, for example, we use Spotify and I believe Pandora, and we experienced targeted ads on both of these platforms.
So I'm trying to think through how this is insidious, if at all. I'm used to, the example I like to give is you search once for flowers, and for the next 6 months they keep trying to sell you more flowers, even though, Mother's Day or Valentine's Day has passed. Is it that sort of targeting that's going on, or is it something maybe deeper that's being tracked?
Yeah, I think there are two ways to look at it. As I think I earlier mentioned, like voice is biometric data, and people cannot delete or change it. For example, if you are tracked on the web when you put something in your cart and you're tracked for it for days, you can remove your cookies or change your browser. You won't be tracked anymore. But in this case, it's your voice. So, like, once it's tracked and the other entity knows that this is your voice profile, they can always use it to reach out to you.
Is there an Alexa incognito mode?
I wish there was, but unfortunately there isn't.
Well, when I install certain software, in particular, I'm thinking of like developer tools like Eclipse or PyCharm or things like that, there's often this choice, will you anonymously report back statistics? And I'm generally in favor of checking that because I'm thinking if there's some sort of bug or error I experience, I want the developer to get an email about it. Hopefully they'll fix it. I want to opt in to help them improve the product. What am I opting into on Alexa? What do I generally agree to in terms of my voice and the recordings that are taking place?
So you mean from a developer perspective or from a user perspective?
From a user perspective, like for example, is it fair game for, let's say, Amazon to be using these to improve their transcription services?
Right, yeah. So I have set up almost 15 Echo devices, like 10 to 20 times. And going through all these setup processes, I never saw an explicit mention of how my data will be used. But Amazon has this dedicated privacy policy page for Alexa. They call it Alexa Privacy Hub. And that web page mentions that users' voice will be used to improve their machine learning models, which includes things like understanding different accents. But it does not mention anything about the voice or echo interactions usage for ad targeting. And same goes for their Alexa FAQ webpage, which lists hundreds of questions on how the data will be used or how Alexa essentially operates. And that webpage also does not mention anything about online advertising.
So we have kind of an undefined set of questions we'd like to answer. Even if we had answers, I'm a big fan of the phrase trust but verify. This is a private ecosystem. Amazon built the whole thing. It's their APIs, their data centers. Is there anything we can do to audit or check it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reason we struggled to understand what was actually happening on these devices. Because generally on, for example, mobile platforms, you can root the whole device to see what identifiers are being collected and what are the endpoints on which those identifiers go. In Amazon's case, they don't provide any developer APIs. So we essentially had to treat that whole system as a black box and see what outputs were getting in and what inputs were going out of that black box.
Could we explore a little bit of some of the engineering challenges? I can't imagine this was easy to build. I'd love to know some of the details about how you set it up.
Yeah, so the setup involved configuring Echo devices. Each of that device was linked to an individual Amazon account and had its unique IP address. That was to ensure that there is no cross-contamination. And we used 10 devices because we wanted to see how Amazon serves ads on different smart speakers usage profiles. So out of these 10 devices, 9 of the devices were simulated as Echo device users. And that simulation essentially involved installing and interacting with the skills from different categories. For example, one persona or one combination of an Echo device could be the one in which we install skills related to health and fitness. Other than these 9 devices, there was this one control device, and that was the device on which we did not install or interact with skills. That was to see how the devices on which we install and interact vary in terms of data collection, its usage, and sharing.
So I guess the null hypothesis would suggest to us that any measurement we do across these 10 devices, we should get pretty much the same result unless there's some reason why those setups, those configurations are being considered by Amazon.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we did. So we saw how the behavior of smart speaker usage profiles with interest personas differ as compared to the control. So we could associate all the deviation from the control to the applied treatment.
And what is your expectation before looking at the data? I mean, it seems maybe fair game that based on my persona, if I'm asking always about stock prices, it might know that I'm interested in stocks. Maybe I'll get ads for it. I guess I don't even know what to expect.
Yeah, I think to be honest, we did not have any expectation because Amazon had defined very clear policies as to what data they collect in terms of, for example, the public statement that I mentioned, that they do not use voice recordings. So we were unsure what to expect. And the results were actually surprising. We did not expect direct inference of interest from Amazon and then their usage for ad targeting.
Hi, I'm another one of those podcast ads that you've managed to tune out so effectively. It's okay, I get it. Listening to podcasts comes with some degree of ad fatigue. But today, you need to listen up because I'm here to tell you about ad fatigue's sinister cousin, alert fatigue. Did you know the average company receives 11,000 security alerts each day? How can a security team stay on top of the most critical threat risks when they can't find the signal in all the noise? Well, they can't, which makes it easy for IT teams to fall victim to alert fatigue, making your company dangerously vulnerable. So you have two choices. Buy all the tools you can until you've made your security operations overwhelmingly complex and totally ineffective, or you can run with the pack. Arctic Wolf is the industry leader in security operations solutions, delivering 24/7 monitoring, assessment, and response through their patented concierge security model. Arctic Wolf works with your existing tools and becomes an extension of your existing IT team, and they never get fatigued. Got your attention now, didn't I? Visit arcticwolf.com/skeptic to learn more. That's arcticwolf.com/skeptic. Thanks to our sponsor BB Edit from Bare Bones Software. If you're a Mac user and you have any need whatsoever for a text editor, which, let's face it, that's got to be all of us, you have got to check out BB Edit. BB Edit 14 provides Mac users the most powerful, professional-grade text editor around. It's known as capable and rock solid, and can process files that are large enough to bring other editors to their knees. This tool's been beloved for over 25 years, and I can understand why. If I'm just typing up some simple hello world, I guess any text editor will do. But when I really get into the weeds and need to do some data processing, maybe I've got a big messy file, I need to find all the non-ASCII characters and remove them, BB Edit's there for me. It has best-of-breed multi-file search and replace and great scripting support for text transformations. There's a whole menu of text transformations that you'll find handy. If you're a serious data scientist or software engineer, you're going to bump into situations where you need a powerful text editor. So download and try BB Edit today. You can get it at www.barebones.com. See how much your productivity can increase. barebones.com and download BB Edit. I want to go back a little bit to the experimental setup. So we've got these 10 unique personas or 9 in the control. Is this automated or is there a person that has to go in and make requests following a script?
So I think that is all automated. We relied on text-to-speech libraries, which read the utterances given by the skills. An automated voice was used to read out all those in an automated manner. And same goes for collecting advertisements on the web. We relied on web drivers, which are commonly used in internet measurement studies that crawl different things on the web.
Gotcha. So that agent then is also a headless browser, so you can get some measurements of what ads they see. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we wanted to be as close to an actual user, so we did not use the headless mode, but we relied on the native browser mode so that the advertisers don't think we are a bot.
So what does the raw data, once collected, look like?
Yeah, so it contained a lot of identifiers, some of which were persistent at the scope of the skill or session. The others were email addresses. They were actually behind permissions, but they were still collected by skills.
At first glance, what did you find? Does the null hypothesis seem to be true, or are you seeing differences across the different personas?
Yeah, so we saw differences across personas. We saw that data was collected more on the interest personas as compared to the control persona. The collected data was actually used to serve targeted ads more on the interest personas and actually never on the control persona.
Some of this is a bit fuzzy in the sense that, okay, I'm served an ad. I get that you can automatically capture that, but the ad could be for a brand new startup that makes, cutting edge space age golf equipment. Would your golf persona, how do you link that and say this is a good match for the golf persona?
Yeah, I think mostly the ads we see require some subjective interpretation. You cannot objectively look at the ad and say that it is related to this persona. So to complement our analysis, we also relied on ad bids. So ad bids are essentially what an advertiser pays to reach a user. So the assumption here is that if advertisers has more information about the person, they would bid higher. And we saw that we consistently got higher bid for interest personas as compared to the control personas. At times, the bid exceeded 30 to 27 times.
The bid seems like it would be private information. How are you able to figure that out?
So in programmatic advertising, there are some protocols like header bidding, which allow some more transparency as compared to the other ones like real-time bidding. And you could actually intercept those bids in the browser and see what the advertisers were actually bidding. So we relied on the websites that support header bidding.
So now that you've got your data set and you see there are some changes, you'd mentioned a little bit about the magnitude of differences, but could you expand upon that? What were maybe some of the most significant differences from control to test?
Yeah, I think the most significant result we had was direct profiling by Amazon. So we downloaded our interests from Amazon for all the interest and control personas. And we saw that Amazon directly inferred user interests that were related to the data we leaked. So that was our direct evidence that Amazon was profiling users. So next, like inferring how that was used and all that comes after that.
So that would mean by asking a lot about golf, we saw golf ads going to just the golf persona, not so much to the other personas or control. Is that right?
Yeah. So for example, for the fashion persona, Amazon told us that you are interested in fashion. And for the smart home persona, Amazon directly told us that you are interested in home and kitchen. So that was the direct evidence that we had.
Aha. So, I mean, that seems pretty clear, right? There's no dispute about that part.
Absolutely.
And how does that line up with policies? I guess since it isn't directly addressed, we could just say this is an undefined aspect of the policy, or is there anything that's perhaps misleading here?
I think it is at best unclear. I do not know the legality of how these privacy policies are supposed to be interpreted. So as from my perspective, my non-legal perspective, I think it is unclear and ambiguous.
And in terms of the bidding behavior, I'm wondering if you could highlight any takeaways from that. It's such a rich data set, right? You have these real values that are coming in real time, but you don't know what's in the mind of the advertiser.
Yeah, it's hard to reverse engineer how the advertiser is interpreting user interest. That's where the subjectivity in ad content analysis comes in. And bids are somewhat easier to interpret because if they are high, they indicate that advertiser knows something about you and they are willing to bid higher.
So I guess our takeaway so far in the discussion is that if I'm an Alexa user and I have clear categorical interests like fashion, that it can detect from the skills I'm interacting with, that it may use that information to allow more broad targeting, including the web, and that we see advertisers who are willing to pay more for that. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think that summarizes it well.
So I get that it's not super clear. I don't know that I would label it insidious. Are there opportunities for this to become a little bit more gray area or users to be shocked about things that are going on?
Yeah, I think it kind of like takes us back to some of our earlier discussion. So I think, again, smart speakers are not like the typical devices that people use for work or communication. They have this notion that they are your assistants or they're kind of like acting on your behalf. So if your assistant who you're talking to or commanding to do something, if they're leaking your data, I think that seems more creepy.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if my secretary knows my preference for beverage and offers me, some affiliate offer the next time that it's brought to me, that would be a little creepy.
Yeah, but imagine if your secretary tells everything she records about you to your competitors. How would you feel about that?
Oh, yeah, that would be especially troubling.
Yeah.
Well, this audit system gives you data about the user experience. You still don't necessarily have knowledge inside what Amazon is doing. That data could be shared elsewhere once it's hit some server, in theory, right? We don't know. Do you have any thoughts on, I don't know if this needs to be legislated or maybe it does, but how and where what's appropriate in terms of maybe what Amazon should or shouldn't be required to expose or disclose or publish?
Yeah, I will touch a little bit on data sharing as well, because we expected that if Amazon is inferring user interest, they may actually share it with other entities on the internet. But since it's a black box, we could not directly see what was happening. But on the web, when we were delivered or we were targeted the personalized ads, we saw that a lot of advertisers were actually syncing their cookies with Amazon. And that got us thinking that these advertisers may be getting some data from Amazon at the back end or from server to server. So we actually investigated bids from the particular advertisers who shared their cookies with Amazon. And those advertisers actually ended up bidding higher than the advertisers who did not sync their cookies with Amazon.
Has Amazon had any official reply once you published your results?
Yeah, so Amazon, for the first part, stated that our results might be incorrect. And I think to answer that, we responded that we appreciate the criticism to our research because generally, as researchers, we are always willing to improve our methodology. But unfortunately, Amazon's criticism was not directed towards any particular experiment or analysis, so we could not understand what they were saying. And the latter part of their statement actually confirmed our results, which stated that Amazon might be using uh, the echo interactions for ad targeting.
What do you think is appropriate if I'm considering getting one, if I have one? If you had a relative who is active in one of these devices, is it time to unplug it, or is this just something to be aware of?
I think as users, we shouldn't be afraid of new technologies because smart speakers have a very clear incentive. They allow for easy input and you can use it to automate your home and all that. It's just that these devices need to be more transparent and they need to allow users more control as to when they can mitigate the data collection, or users should be made more aware on how their data will be used and essentially for those purposes.
And what about the future for auditing? Trust but verify, like I said. What do you think is appropriate for these devices given how intimate access they have into our lives?
I think we need to define regulations that would specify what data can be collected and how can it be used, because again, I think that's very sensitive information, and currently we do not have any clear regulations on how that data will be controlled.
And are you aware of any trends? Are these devices on the increase? Have we seen a peak, or what's coming next in the voice assistant space?
Yeah, I think the usage has been exploding. If I remember correctly, more than 96 million people in the US alone use smart speakers. And I was looking at some of the projections, and the usage and their market share is expected to grow exponentially.
Well, with that, certainly there'll be more concerns and questions about how data is being shared and all that. And I think a lot more research in this direction will contribute to it. Maybe down a separate path, I was wondering if you would comment on more of a science fiction kind of angle to this. Should people, do you think, be worried that behind the scenes, another country could somehow infiltrate one of these networks and all of our homes could be listened on, yet no one's able to detect that somehow? Are the right checks in place where researchers like you would know about something like that?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. And I think to best handle such cases or to understand those cases, these devices need to provide researchers some tools so that they can build tools that can control the flow of information and understand what is happening. I think that's the best way forward.
And are there steps being taken in that direction that you're aware of, or are these things you're hoping for that haven't really materialized yet?
We have looked at Amazon closely, and Amazon unfortunately does not offer such controls. I do not know if other platforms like Apple or Google provide such APIs or open access to these smart speakers.
Well, maybe that can be a selling point for the next generation of devices.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think privacy has become important, and Apple, it's kind of like at the center of a lot of things they do, and they kind of like use it to advertise their most popular product, which is the iPhone.
Well, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a few details about your home technology setup and what steps you take for privacy.
Yeah, so generally, for researching or better understanding these smart speakers, I have to use them, and I have put one in my home. And when I'm not using it, I mostly plug it out. But again, I think as consumers, we shouldn't be afraid of futuristic technologies. So I think we need to have more controls in which we can better manage these speakers. Amazon currently provides some options to users to manage their preferences. For example, they can delete the voice recordings and also mute their smart speakers when they're not using them. So people can rely on these tools to understand what is collected and if they want to opt out of some of these things.
Well, not everyone's a researcher with the same level of curiosity about these tools that you and I have. What should the average person know if there's just a few key takeaways?
I think as an average consumer, we should be aware of the potential harms of these things, and we should educate ourselves on how we can best protect ourselves. It's of course like not easy for everyone, but we should educate, for example, our parents who may not be as tech savvy to inform them how they can use these devices and what they can do to control some of these data flows.
Good advice. Well, Umar, is there anywhere people can follow you and your work online?
Yeah, I am available through email for more technical discussions, and I'm also active, semi-active on Twitter. Yep, my Twitter handle is UMAARR6, and my email is umar@cs.washington.edu.
We'll have links in the show notes for people who want to follow up. Umar, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your work.
Thank you for having me.
That's another Data Skeptic ad tech in the can. Here's your preview of next week.
So I was scrolling through my Facebook feed and I saw an ad that said, "Do you want this product for free? If so, click here." So I thought it would be a scam, but I just went ahead with it anyway.
He was absolutely right. It definitely was a scam. What kind of scam, you'll have to find out next week.